All right. So thank you everyone so much for joining us for Rapid Fire Admin. We are going to be kicking off this morning here with Steve Pitcher. This is a 90-minute session. So be prepared. Make sure you've got your coffee ready, a little water. Steve is going to go through some of this very quickly, fire some stuff at you, maybe scare you a little bit. It's one of my favorite things about when Steve presents. So Steve, I'm going to hand this over to you. And also real quick, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A tab in your panel on the side. Once Steve's done presenting, he will get back to all of your questions.
Thank you, Heather. Hey, everybody. This is Rapid Fire Admin, and welcome, first and foremost. If you've seen this session before, I try to keep this up to date every few months so that there's at least a good noticeable refresh of content. So we're going to try to get through roughly about 150 tips in 90 minutes. Some screens will have more than one tip on them, so there's about 100 slides here. I'll try to gauge this as best I can, and yeah, we should have a little bit of fun here, I would hope. Anyways, let's start with SQL. All right, so when we're talking, and I had this conversation last week with a customer of ours, and doing a little bit of security assessment, and I'm just copy and pasting SQL over into a team session, and this person on the other line is like, "Well, I don't know SQL." I was like, "Well, neither did I a few years ago." I started getting familiar with SQL by being familiar with IBM iServices or DB2 for iServices. Roughly speaking, IBM started to build this stuff a couple of months into 7.1, if I remember correctly. And the purpose of it is to provide simple ways to get data out of the system by way of SQL. Things that you may have not been able to get easily or at all before. Chaining work query output to another output file, bringing that in as the source, rerunning it through, outputting it to a different one, chaining to something else, and pulling some information to get one number at the end. This drastically simplifies the amount of work you need to do in order to pull valuable information out of your system. So we're going to talk a bit about SQL here. We're going to go through some examples and provide you with a little bit of code that you can take and put into your systems, just as maybe even just an introduction, as a teaser to show you what you can get from your system quite easily with SQL. This one I used very recently, in fact. What does this get me? Well, if I want to understand what file shares are being used on the system, okay, if we're doing a security hardening engagement for file shares, and I'm thinking, okay, well, you got 25 file shares and you're sharing the home directory, okay, the root home directory. I'm not a fan of sharing that. I want to be a lot more granular. If I have to share something underneath home, you can bet I'm going to go down as far as I need to and then share that. But I'm curious who's using the home directory. Well, if I turn authority collection on at 7.4 and above for the home directory, I can easily pull information from the authority collection file system object service. This is and qualify it with the job name of QZLS file or QZLS file T. That's your single and multi-threaded jobs, client jobs from that server. And the path name is going to be /home or /whatever. It will then pull back all of my net server jobs that are hitting that directory. It'll pull back everything, but this guy right here, specify the QZLS file and QZLS file T names are going to bring me back all of my net server jobs. Now I know who's using the home share in net server. Very handy. Now I have a list of people I can talk to. What are you doing there? Where are you going? That home share is going away. I'm going to give you a share underneath it somewhere. So you'd best talk to me because the home share is going away. This is incredibly handy. So authority collection, just so you're aware, it's a feature that came out in 7.3 for user profile access. So if I put authority collection on a profile, It will track every touch, every object touch that user profile makes. In 7.4, they enhanced it so I can do authority collection on an object. More specifically, in this case, stream files. So I'll start authority collection for the home directory and all the subdirectories if I want to, or maybe just the home directory in and of itself, and build myself a map using this little bit of SQL. Database whitespace. Big honking piece of SQL aside, this just gives me a couple of very basic pieces of information. I want to understand how much white space I have in my tables. And I want to see this in descending order by the actual number of deleted rows. So what I'm looking for is a very concentrated viewpoint of the bloat on my system in DB2 specifically. You run this guy, it will give you that. So I have now a targeted list of objects, tables to be specific. If I want to do a reorg and I want to eliminate the white space in there. Now, I hear this all the time. Well, we do reorgs all the time. Sure you do. You probably do them on 15 to 20 different tables, and you've been doing that since 1989. There are always a whole bunch of surprises in this particular list here, and often we're able to glean back 10 to 15% of total disk space used by investigating and attacking your white space appropriately. We're going to talk a little bit about hijacking user profiles here. So from a penetration test perspective, if I'm elevating my authority, the first thing I'm going to try to do is concentrate on user profiles that have not been properly secured. So by default, a user profile object has an authority for star public to equal star exclude. So everybody cannot see every other user profile on the system. It's built that way for a reason. If a user profile object has either use, change, or all, doesn't matter, I can hijack that profile and elevate my authority, especially if that profile has a special authority like all object or what have you. There's always a couple, and they're usually built by ISVs or independent software vendors. So if there's any ISVs on the call, hey, check your systems just to make sure, check a customer system to make sure that's not the case. Every now and then we find a user built one, but more often than not, it's an ISV putting them out there. If I am elevating my authority on a pen test, I'm very seldom, well, I'll say this in a different way. I've never been blocked from elevating my authority on a system, ever. 80% of the time, it's through this little hack. And it's not a hack. It's just taking advantage of human behavior. We have a session on that a little bit later today. We're going to talk a bit about security. But this little script here will give me, very quickly, a list of users that are not star public, star exclude. Plus, it will also tell me what special authorities that particular user has. So I can easily see which profile I want to take care of, and then hijack and own the system with. Another thing to look at would be objects that have been changed since the last full system save. Okay, I have this in our verify utility, and assuming people do a save or a full system save every now and then, I want to see what objects are changing on a regular basis that are not backed up every night. So this little piece of code here pulls that information, because knowing that you're backing up things that you're supposed to be backing up is one thing. Knowing the things you should be backing up that you're not backing up is this. Quite important. So this will give me a list of objects. This will give me a list of objects with libraries. So, if I want to understand how many libraries I have, which have objects that are not being backed up on a regular basis, this one will do that. So I've got two here. One with just, hey, how many objects do I got? And this is going to be, well, show me the libraries. Either way, you can kind of re-engineer them a little bit. And anything here is not set in stone by any stretch of the imagination. Another cool way that I'm able to elevate my authority on a penetration test is by hijacking commands. If I'm authorized to a let's just say I'm a standard user and it's a white box penetration test. I'm on the system as a regular user, junior accountant, sales rep, what have you, somebody who shouldn't have any special authorities. I will run this in run SQL scripts, and I will then determine a list of objects, commands, and command programs that will adopt authority. It'll also bring back some cute little things like text descriptions. So while the name of the object may not be very descriptive, the text of the object may tell me exactly what I need to know. And all we have to do is rely on the program being in your call stack, and then we now have the darn thing in our we now have an elevated authority by running a program that adopts the owner's authority. Another cool thing with authority collection, this will show you everything accessed by all object special authority. I should pick up the speed a little bit. First session of the day, I'm a little slow. List the objects accessed by all object special authority. This is another hack on the the authority collection that came with 7.3. If I want to understand users with all object, when they invoke them, why they invoke them, authority collection on the user profile is what we use. Same thing with group authority. You can kind of riff on this a little bit in order to pull information what you want to see. If I want to see object privileges for a particular user, now I would strongly suggest you qualify this by a library or something like this. Don't let this sucker rip on your system. It's going to take a long time to finally finish. But if I want to understand exactly what a user profile has access to, I can pull a list and again, be a little bit more granular in your SQL, tailor it to the library on your system that works. If I want to find things like PTFs that are loaded and not applied, that could be quite handy. If I want to see PTFs that are impacted on the next IPL, very similar. It's good to see, because if I'm expecting just to do an IPL this Saturday night on a customer system, okay, that's great. However, if I identify 60,000 PTFs that are going to come down and be, applied on the IPL, chances are that IPL might take a little bit longer than I'm anticipating. So it's one of these things that you might want to be aware of. Maybe you have somebody pulling down the latest Cume groups and hypers, and it's set to apply in the next IPL, and nobody knows about it except for that person. This will tell you, hey, you've got a ton of PTFs that are going to apply in the next IPL. You might be wary about that. PTF currency, since we're talking PTFs, this will show what you have on your system in terms of PTF groups, and it will also cross-reference with what IBM has for you to download and then apply. So it's a nice little utility to understand where you are and where you could or should be, depending on your perspective, I suppose. Everybody knows the analyze default password command. Sure, it does work. It brings you back a couple of pieces of information. What we're looking at are user profiles where the user ID matches the password. That's historically known as a default password. So ANZ PWD does work well. It's a useful utility, but it's very limited in scope. It's very narrow in scope. Attack the QSys2 user info view. Very simply, I'm just going to pull all records where the default password is yes. Okay, that's quite handy, but I can riff on that a little bit. If I want to see all user profiles with a default password of yes and have special authorities of some kind, or that have never signed on before. So maybe somebody created a user profile, which is a copy of QSEC offer, has a default password and never signed on. The created date for the user profile was 6 years ago. Well, that's a pretty big risk you may have. So you can get kind of granular and make the system tell you the story of not just, yes, you've got a couple of users with default passwords, but context matters a ton. Let's talk a little bit about cleanup. One thing I like doing, not everybody likes to do this. I like doing this. I like detaching my spool files from jobs. Okay, what does that do? Well, when a job ends on the system, if the job has any output, that output's going to sit there attached to the job. The job still takes up space in the job table. Okay, so if you have issues with your job tables filling up, maybe faster than you want to, you might want to look at detaching your spool files from those jobs. The spool files will still exist. However, when the job ends, it ends. It's removed from the job table. You don't have to worry about that there. You can still find that spool file. No, you cannot do a work job, find the job, hit a 4, and look for the spool files anymore. Okay, fair enough. However, I can quite easily look for those things in Navigator. Easy peasy. We should all be using Navigator. Clean up. Run your damage object detection. So when do we always find damage objects? On a full system save. So if you have a full system save scheduled and you're 3 hours into the full system save and the save bombs, why has a damaged object? Save is useless at that point. You got to bring the system back up, find the object, repair it, recover it, delete it, whatever. Your night's done. You can run a damage object connect. You can run a damage object detection. I suppose the source for this has come down with the ARE product, your Administration Runtime Expert product, but you can also go to this IBM link there and follow the documentation there, pulling it down. I like hacking or riffing on old commands rather. We say, hey, how many users do you have on the system right now? Well, what does everybody do? Everybody will go do a work actor job, page down 9 times, find, queue enter, and then tally them up, or whatever interactive subsystem you have defined. You can do display sys status, assistance level basic. Most people on this call, if they're an administrator, are usually using the intermediate or advanced screens. But if you riff on some of these old commands, you get some interesting value out of it. Display sys status, assistance level basic will give me how many users I have signed on. That's cute. I like it. You can also find this information, by the way, with SQL. So yes, it may be a pain in the butt to, type that in. We don't want you to type in those scripts every time you want to, run a command. Run SQL scripts will allow you to save your commands on your PC, on your IFS, wherever. That way, if you want to find information, you can pull it from there. Or if you want to be slick about it, build yourself a little dashboard of the 15, 20 things that you find important about your system and just refresh the screen. It's handy stuff. I'll beat on Access for Windows for a second. I keep seeing it out there. Okay. Use Access Client Solutions, not just for your administrators and developers, but for everybody. If you're using Access for Windows, I can almost guarantee that you're not using any encryption. If you're not using any encryption, you should be using encryption. Why aren't you using encryption? Because Access for Windows encryption will not communicate with 7.4 and 7.5 unless you really downgrade your 7.4 and 7.5 encryption to make it work. ACS is the standard. It is the client. You see the sizes there. The client sizes were growing and growing and growing. It's because that's where the work is going. That's where they're putting the features in. It's very customizable. It'll run everywhere. You can do cool things like Control-C and Control-V out of the can. The old Windows client, it used to take a little bit of work to make that do that. Now you can do that now. If I want to customize my cursor location, I do a Control-V paste. The cursor by default goes to the beginning of the string that I just pasted. Well, that's useless. I want to go to the end of the string because I want to keep typing maybe. So if I want to do that, I can do that here. I can see a screen history. If I'm building a documentation set, every time I hit F12 or enter or a function key, any function key, it will take a snapshot in the background and hide it. So if I want to build a documentation set of here's how we go through this screen to this screen to this screen as part of a user's normal workflow, this does this for me. You can not have to use Oracle Java if you don't want to as well. With ACS, I can download OpenJDK and I can embed the JDK inside, or the JRE rather, inside the ACS install image. It's not even an install really. I could pull this down, run ACS without needing Oracle Java installed. Navigator, again, Access for Windows is dead. It's dead. Stop using it, please. You can use the Fat Client Navigator if you want to. However, I like if I'm paying for SWAMA software maintenance, I want to get the money that or get the value of the money that we just spent. So Navigator Fry on the web, that's where you want to be. It's where everything is going or has gone. It's a complete rewrite, by the way, with the Log4j, issue there about a year and a half, 2 years ago, whenever it was. The old Navigator was just full of it. So IBM made the decision to say, well, we're going to PTF that out, we're going to disable it, and we're going to rewrite a brand new interface. And they built the darn thing from scratch. It's not just the old Navigator with some new stuff in there. It is a rebuild, rewrite, and it works very quickly now. How do you get to it? That's your system, port 2002/Navigator. What's some cool things in Navigator? Your global fast search. This did not go away. It doesn't exist in the FAT client, by the way. But if I want to look for, I don't know, words in the English language or whatever language your system is in, I type in disk. I see some disk stuff that show up. If I want to use a historical command like work disk status, it will reverse engineer and say, disk status or SSD status or what have you. It's cute. Favorites in here is awesome. If there's anybody here that does any work with, say, WebSphere, where you have log directories built 29, levels deep into your IFS, this may be cool for you. Bookmark those places. Bookmark any place in Navigator, and it will show in your favorites. So not just for hard to find IFS paths or deep to find IFS paths. If I want to bookmark, I don't know, my user profiles, or if I want to bookmark EIM or any other part of Navigator, you can do that. Filters on every single table as well. This is a work with active jobs screen. So if I want to find users or jobs by user profile, if I want to do jobs by run priority, anything like that, it will let me do that with every single one of these filters on the top. This right here in the top hand or in the top right hand corner, this SQL, every single table in Navigator has the SQL used to build what you're seeing. So if you see something in Nav that you want to see maybe a little bit differently, just look at the SQL that they use to build the darn thing and then riff on that SQL and build your own. This is a point of contention for me. Network IP addresses without descriptions. Please put your descriptions in, especially if you use more than one IP address on your system. When I was a customer, I had maybe 15 or 16. And a couple of things why Navigator makes it cool. If I put a description on it on a green screen, how am I going to see that description? Well, you don't really see it when you do a config TCP option 1. I just see my list of interfaces. I don't see the description. I have to put a 5 on it. Then I've got a page down, and then I can see what the heck that is. Navigator puts it right there on the main screen for you, so I can get a bird's eye view of the interfaces that I want to work with. Updating your WebSphere fix packs. Okay, I mentioned WebSphere. I'm an old school WebSphere guy. And I say far easier than in a Q shell. Okay, so if you've updated WebSphere with Q shell before, you know how painful that may be. You can use the administration client, technically Navigator, in order to manage your WebSphere instances, install them, update them, fix pack them, whatever. You can do this on the web. I've never seen a web interface upgrade or update blow up like I've seen a shell blow up. And I'm scratching out Q shell. Little tip for you. Q shell is a shell emulator. Okay, it's not a true terminal. What you want to do is start using, if you need to use SSH on your system or a shell on your system, start using a SSH client. I don't care what you use PuTTY, use whatever, and get on your system. Set your shell to be bash, for instance. You can have, you can specify what actual type of shell you're using. Why would you do that? Well, you get all the benefits of using bash, like, I don't know, retrieving commands that are persistent across connections. So I log in, I run 15 commands, I log off. And then the next time I log in, I still have access to those commands. I have color coding on my screen. I have a properly responsive or a proper responsive shell coming back to me or terminal coming back to me. So have a look at that, because there's some value in using that. If you're using Q shell commands, use shell commands in a proper terminal. Cutesy little thing. Not everybody knows this. I still see this. People don't have transform services installed. Check it on your system. Do a Go license program option 10 and have a look for 5770-TS1. That will convert your output to PDF on the fly. It will also allow you to convert anything to PDF on the fly if you do choose. I know people that have rewritten a work spool file command screen and added a last example for X. And the X, guess what that does? It takes advantage of TS1 and builds a spool file. Sure, you could do it that way, but if you look at it in Navigator, you can convert it to a spool file to begin with without the extra effort. Service tools, you can match your user profile. You need to have a linked profile, so a service tool ID with a user profile on IBM i, and I can go into Navigator and I can do things, do fairly invasive things if I wanted to, like doing disk work. If I want to alter or add a disk unit, I can see my non-configured disk drives and I can add them all through Navigator. No need to actually go into SST. I want to talk about GoNets for a second. The value of GoNets. So this command, and I'm seriously considering putting this into IBM as a request for enhancement. I want this particular command as a part of the operating system. Yes, you can download it. You can pull it down your system. You can compile it, and it's a great little command. It'll allow you to see all of your net server information on a green screen. Okay, I just spent the last 10 minutes talking about Navigator and how Navigator is awesome and the cool stuff you can do in Navigator. Why am I advocating for more green screen stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. I do a lot of ransomware remediations or malware remediation. And when we're doing a malware remediation, oftentimes things are turned off after the fact. Either they're off because the ransomware destroyed it. Okay, so I can't get to Navigator, or we have the system in a restricted state post breach, and we want to make sure, everything is okay. We want to do a little forensics. We want to see exactly what happened. So guess what? I'm not turning on Navigator to see my net server shares when we're trying to do something in a very secure fashion. We don't want to introduce any more risk. So GoNets is incredibly important. I used it yesterday with a customer having a ransomware attack. I didn't hear about it for 2 days later. They had the attack on Saturday, and we were told about it on Monday. However, we went in there and we're having a look. And the first thing I look for immediately is GoNets. Take option 11, look at the shares. Great. Now I have a list of their 27 shares. I can see if there's anything damaged underneath those directories. Luckily, with those folks, I'm not even going to talk about it. Let's just say they were able to move forward without having to recover the entire system. It was functional. If we're talking about doing things with NetServer, a lot of times people go into Navigator just to go to your, re-enable your disabled NetServer accounts. Happens from time to time. So you can go in there and you can do one of two things. You can bookmark the disabled users for NetServer screen, or in the global fast search, you can type in the word disabled, and the only thing that's going to pop up is this option for disabled users for IBM NetServer. You can come in here, re-enable the NetServer accounts, and you're off to the races. Still seeing people at 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. So there's some reasons why we want to get people moved up to 7.4 and 7.5. Not just that they are the only supported operating systems we have, but there's some value technologically. Since we're talking NetServer, the SMB, your server message block version. So at 7.4 and 7.5, NetServer is SMB3. 7.3 and 7.2 with PTFs, you can do SMB2. 7.1, sorry, SMB1. It's a bit of a problem. So if we're trying to harden our system in a number of different ways, People say, well, my system's locked down. I don't need to upgrade. Well, you kind of do, because the underlying stuff that's baked into the product that you're trying to use is kind of kneecapping you there. So if you're on 7.2 and you don't use PTFs, well, or you don't put on PTFs very often, you're probably not using SMB2. Let's start moving this forward, right? Going to 7.3 and then saying, well, I want to turn SMB2 off and only use SMB1. We see that a lot still to this day for interoperability purposes in the organization, or the customer is still using QDLS, which doesn't really work on SMB2 and 3 very well, if at all. So we need to do a couple of things there. We need to stop using QDLS if at all possible. Or if we use QDLS, we need to stop sharing QDLS in NetServer, because that is forcing you to, maintain an old SMB standard. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's build better mousetraps where we're taking objects out of QDLS, putting them in a proper stream file share, and then from there, share that and have, accountants put spreadsheets in there and then just automatically pull them into QDLS around about way, if you can't get rid of the QDLS completely. But you can always get rid of that QDLS share for sure. Back to network a little bit. Check your line descriptions from time to time. What happens when you do a restore from a system to a system? Okay, you got a power 8 going to a power 10. We're going to come in. We're going to do a save 21 on the old system. We're going to power the new system up. We're going to build the new system from that tape image. So we're getting your lick and your operating system. We're going to do a restore 21, kind of a modified restore 21, and you're migrated. It's easy peasy. Well, I'll dummy it down for myself. It's relatively easy, but a lot of steps in order to get you to a successful migration at the end of it. Now, how much looking around does anybody do post-migration? Well, they'll look at, is my data the same? Yes, it's the same. Is my system name the same? Yes. They never check and see if we're taking old line descriptions from 1988 and recovering them, and they still have properties set 25 years ago. Maybe they're at half duplex. Maybe the line speed is capped at 100 meg and you're plugged into a gigabit switch or higher. I saw this 3-4 months ago with a customer of mine, literally 40 minutes down the road. And they're like, our transfer speeds for we're SSHing or SFTPing stuff, to other servers or around the world, it's just so slow. So we had a little luck, and their line speed is set to 100 megabits. I'm like, okay, that's a problem. So we can just alter that line description and make it gigabit, or we can do something cool like doing link aggregation. You've got 3 ports not plugged in. So you've got your console port is a single 4-port card with LAN console. So they've got 4 network connections on there. T1 is LAN console only. T2 would be, their standard Ethernet line set to 100 meg. Great. Let's take 2, 3, and 4, and we'll create a virtual line description and aggregate those. So now I not only have 100 megabits, but I have 3 times gigabit. So I've got 3 gigabit in terms of throughput, and I have redundancy built in. Now I have 3 different ports in case the switch port dies, or one of the IBM line description ports dies, or somebody pulls it out. I'm still alive on the network if I aggregate my my network resources. It's very simple to do. It takes, 15 minutes. It's not hard. Let's check those guys. One, did I jump 2? No, I jumped 1. Symmetric multiprocessing. This used to be one of my favorite features. And it was very, very cheap years ago. Now it's free. IBM had consolidated a lot of their licensed programs and kind of stuck them in and said, okay, well, you're getting these are all inclusive now for your LPPs. SMP was one of them. What is SMP? Well, there's value with SMP. Years and years and years and years ago, if you had a N-way machine, meaning you had, say, 2-3 cores on an old AS400, you had a very big, very expensive machine. Nowadays, you can't buy a system with less than 4 cores on it. Yes, the licensing cost for IBMI is a little expensive, but you get value for that. So the amount of people who had SMP over the years were very few. What this does, and now it's free, there's no excuse to give it a try, or not give it a try, rather. What this does is gives you more of a more throughput on the cores on your system. Let's just say, for example, you have an IBMI partition. I'll use these graphs as an example. The before and after are both the same 3-core IBMI partition with X amount of RAM and whatever. I want to get more value out of those cores. So turned on we installed SMP and we set system value Q query degree to start optimize. You can put it to low, optimize, high. Optimize is your good neighbor value. It's not really going to interfere with too much, but all of your DB2 access coming through your cores will now be running with parallelism. What's parallelism? Well, if I have a task on the system, okay, without parallelism or SMP installed and running, if I submit a job or a task on the system, it's going to be attacked by one core, period. I don't care if I have 3 cores on the partition or 10 cores on the partition. It's going to use one of those cores. That's it. With SMP enabled, it will kind of chop up that one task into multiple tasks and throw them at all of your cores at the same time. So your processor throughput goes kind of through the roof. You're using those processors to a much greater extent than you had before. So you'll see the little before and the after here. Right here, we're throughout the day, roughly speaking, at 50%, 55% of the processor, and then it kind of bumps to 70 at night. After we enable SMP, you're kind of rolling around 20, 25, little bumps up here during the night to 50. But overall, you're looking at much more efficient use of your processor cores just by turning this on and giving it a shot. Your mileage may vary. Every system workload is different, but this type of value is something that I would always recommend people at least give it a try. SMT8, this is kind of old news. I keep leaving it in there. Just the value of using SMT8 is much stronger than SMT4. NVMe adapters, let's talk a little bit about that. So if I'm buying storage now for a system and I have a customer who's looking at doing a Power 10 and they have maybe 18 solid state drives right now. Those things cost a fortune 6 or 7 years ago when they bought them. So when we're configuring a new machine, like we've been doing for the last 5 years, give or take, we've been configuring almost exclusively NVMe adapters. They're about 4 or 5 times faster than solid state drives, and they're less expensive than hard disk drives, which you can't even buy anymore. And we've been beating on that for years, saying HDDs are going away. Guess what happened? They went away. So your options, you want to go to a Power 10, internal storage, you're looking at NVMe or you're looking at SSD. If you want to throw money at SSDs, you're more than welcome to. I would much rather spend a little more effectively, quite a bit less money compared to SSDs and get more performance using NVMEs. Problem is, make sure you buy them in pairs because they are effectively a PCI card. Okay. And you want to make sure they're redundant. So you have, let's just say you want, 6.4 terabytes available. You will actually be buying 12.8 terabytes. Okay. You'll have 6.4 here. You have 2 cards. You'll have them sliced up into what's called namespaces or virtual, little LUNs. Virtual disk drives. So I'll have my 2 cards here, my 2 cards here, and I'll mirror card 1 to card 3 and card 2 to card 4. And now I have redundancy in case one of those fails. And guess what? In 5 years, 6 years, I've never seen an NVMe adapter fail. How many disk drives have we seen fail over that course of that time? Countless. ARE, Administration Runtime Expert. This is a cool utility. I think I was trying to say cute and cool at the same time. ARE is pretty neat in that it will allow you to do a ton of stuff on your system in terms of seeing how things operate. One of the nicest things I like about it is the ability to take a snapshot at a optimally performing workload. Okay, I can do that. I can see all the properties of that workload. And then 6 months later, if that workload takes a nosedive for some reason, oh, this is real sluggish. It started Tuesday. Okay, great. Let's take another snapshot of it and we can compare the two snapshots. Now we can see, has anything changed? Did somebody alter? Maybe it's a Java workload. Did somebody decrease the heap size capability? Did the subsystem get smaller? Did somebody take memory out of that particular pool? Who knows? But this will tell you differences that will give you a head start in troubleshooting what the heck happened. In terms of Java, check your JVMs. Okay, heap size utilization. We're working with another customer, and I've seen this a number of times, where they have a particular ERP, and guess what happens on the ERP? Sometimes the heap size will run out. They got a memory leak somewhere in Java, and they've got their heaps set way too small. So the ERP vendor says, well, you should just reboot when this happens. Meanwhile, they're not solving the problem. They're solving the symptom of the problem by rebooting it. So if you want to see your Java memory utilization or other properties of your Java application, use your work JVM job command, or you can use the Java info DB2 service or IBMI service. It'll tell you the exact same thing. In terms of cleanup or performance, we see this every now and then. It just kills me. The /TMP directory. People want to clean up their systems. I get that. You want to keep things neat and tidy. I totally get it. This is not a temporary directory. It is a directory just called TMP. So people may assume I'm going to write something to that directory, and then when I'm done my job, it just goes away, kind of like Qtemp. It doesn't. You put something in here, it's going to stay there forever. So if you're looking to clean things up, I very highly recommend you do not do a work link /temp and put a 4 on it and clear the whole thing out. A lot of software vendors use the temp directory for permanent objects. This little place is something you don't want to destroy on a whim. If you want to clean it out, make sure you back everything in there up first. And even with that, you want to be careful. It's just dangerous. Anyway, this is an old screenshot. I've been looking at this for years and years and years. You see the date on 10.5.15. Index Advisor. So when we're doing performance analysis for customers, we usually look at a couple of very basic things to start. We look at deleted records and white space. I alluded to that earlier. It's important to know about that stuff because let's just talk from a white space perspective. I'll go back on that. I'll pay for real estate twice, I suppose, but there's value there in talking about it. When you delete a record, the record does not necessarily get deleted. Okay, it gets marked as deleted. So RPG, SQL, whatever, you can never pull back a deleted record and display it on a screen. Okay, fair enough. The record still exists in that file. That deletion is called a piece of white space. So when we're going down through, let's say we're doing an RPG program, it's reading through 1 million records. Half of those records are deleted. They still have to go through those 1 million records to hit the bottom, insert a new record, assuming you're not reusing deleted rows. And it takes time to process through those records. So we want to ensure that we can reorganize and squash the tables to be as optimally performing as possible. So that's one thing we usually do. The other thing we do is look at things like Index Advisor. There's 3 things, actually. I'll get to the other one in a minute. But Index Advisor, every time you do a data access on the system, I don't care what you do, if you do RPG or Open Query File or SQL or whatever, if the system builds a temporary index, it will do that repeatedly. And it will also keep track of how many times it's building a temporary index for you. So if you can look at your index advisor, you may see, and we've seen this before many, many times, in the tens or hundreds of billions of times that the system's saying, hey, we keep building a temporary index over here. Every time you've run this thing, it's ran 46 billion times. You may want to build a permanent index so we can stop wasting our resources on the system, building those temporary indexes over and over and over and over again. It's handy to do that. So have a look at your index advisor. And if you build an index or index over a data access through a table, it will make that go just a little bit better, especially if that table has millions of rows in it. Every little bit helps when you're dealing with large amounts of data. So it may seem like nothing, but it's definitely something you want to look at. Temporary storage, this is something also to look at from time to time. If I want to understand how much temp storage is out there and what's taking it up, I can look for that with a little SQL. Now, I want to mention this because I heard this last week, I think. Temporary storage is not RAM. It's not memory, okay? It's things that are in QTemp. It's temporary objects built on the system that, are just there to do a particular process. And then when the system is done with them, it's gone. But it's still nice to understand what your temporary storage does look at or does look like. Audit your printing. People still print a lot, even in 2024. 10 years ago, it was worse. It's getting better for sure. People are doing PDF. People are doing, open documents, or they're sending things electronically and whatnot. However, I still see people printing a whole lot of stuff. So you can use your journal receivers and you can save your company some money by understanding what's the total cost of every page I'm printing. And then you can use your security audit journal in order to determine by user profile who's printing what, how much money are they costing us. I like that. I did this 10, 12 years ago for a company I was working for. Our printing costs were roughly $600,000 until we did a little analysis, and then we cut $400,000 out of the equation, because we don't need to be printing a 600-page green bar report to put on the CEO's desk that he could just sign on the bottom and then it goes into the ether somewhere. It's ridiculous. There are better ways to do things. This is my only product plug. If you have an issue with Windows printing, it has nothing to do with IBMI, but it's a nice little solution. It's a couple of $100. All right. This does the same thing, except from a Windows side of the coin. So you can track how much output I'm printing by way of Windows. The thing about Windows is it's usually color, or it can be color a little bit more often than IBMI. So you can really track that stuff and save some money that way. There's been some enhancements to some commands over the years. One I like here is for delete PTF. So you can do some special values. You can do a delete PTF star all. It'll delete all the PTFs on your system that are waiting there. If I want to do just save file only, I can say, hey, I want to delete all the PTFs that are just stuck in save file only. That's all it's there. Let's just blow them away, kill them. Or I want to delete all, cover letters. It's kind of neat. This guy right here, your PTF group catch-all, all right, SF997514131, so on and so forth. I used to kind of like this when I was a customer, because I thought, well, I'm just going to pull down everything. If I want, this is going to cover me by cross-referencing what I have and then pulling it down from IBM. Now I'm up to date with all my QMs, groups, and hypers. All right, that's great. But it does not do that. It does something a little bit more. It pulls down everything available for your release, whether you have it installed or not. So working for a company that does a lot of PTFs and a lot of OS upgrades, if we were to jump on a system and we do a work PTF group and we're rolling down through and we see, MQ, okay, they must have MQ. They loaded the PTFs. WebSphere. Okay, I guess they have WebSphere as well. Whatever. It's confusing because it makes it look like we have stuff installed when we don't. Okay, it's going to put those PTFs on whether the LPP exists or not. That can get quite tangly And I like clarity when doing an OS upgrade. So here's a tip. If you want to download PTFs, download them for the groups that you have. If you've got, your Apache server running and you're running Apache servers, pull down the Apache PTF, pull down the DB2 group, so on and so forth. Be more selective on what you pull down onto the system, not the catch-all. Good time. Okay, you can read that slide while I take a little sip of my drink here. I'll do a time check. That's not bad. So I got a little bit of time. So what does this mean on your 5250 emulator? So if you're looking at a green screen, you can look at your green screen right now. Have a look down at the bottom right-hand corner. You'll probably see this guy. What does that mean? Well, let's break it down. It's a little lock, and the lock is unlocked. Okay. That just means that my connection to my IBMI by way of a telnet screen is not encrypted. It's in clear text, meaning the user ID and password I sent to the system is in clear text, meaning the sales report or the payroll report or the payroll data entry that I've done just now is all in clear text going across my network. Encryption on IBMI is one of the more simpler things that you can do. It takes maybe, if you're using a local certificate authority, 15 minutes. It takes me 15 minutes. If you're using a public certifier like VeriSign or GoDaddy or Network Solutions or somebody like that, it'll take you a little longer because you have to generate the certificate signing request, send it to them. They'll generate the cert, you pull it down, import it into your IBMI. And, it takes a little longer, but there's value in that. Well, either way, if you just want to encrypt your network connections on your system, not just Telnet, but for, just about everything, building the certificate and assigning it to your applications does not take much time at all. What you want to see is the little close lock, and the color will change. And you can click on that color and it will, or that little icon there, you click on that guy, it's going to pop up a little window. And it's going to say, yeah, you're encrypted using, this protocol and this cipher. And, it'll give you a little bit more of a peace of mind that you're not sending clear text confidential data, including your user ID and password, all across your network. We do, full sessions on encryption, the value of encryption. You don't want to be caught with anybody in your network with a sniffer. So it's best to encrypt everything you have communications wise. It doesn't take much effort. In fact, it's one of the most low risk, high reward things that you can possibly do on IBMI. It's very simple to do. I just told you all of this. I do that. I tend to drift time to time from slide to slide. This is kind of important. I'm going to show you a couple of neat things and the reasoning behind them. Maybe I'll drift. I'll do that. Let's talk about the reason. So with 7.4 and 7.5, every release, IBM does some neat things with encryption. They may add some things. They may remove some things. And it's usually not a problem going release to release. At 7.4 and 7.5, IBM removed a number of different protocols and ciphers as their default set. Ciphers specifically. So your protocol, you might be using TLS 1.2, and let's just give you an example. You're on 7.2, you're using TLS 1.2, or you're on 7.3, you're using TLS 1.2, either way, and you're using an RSA cipher. Okay, fair enough. Once you go to 7.4 or 7.5, that RSA cipher is not going to work anymore. So if you have manually specified, or even just using the operating system defaults, a lot of that stuff in terms of ciphers will not be there for you by default at 7.4 and 7.5. So what happens after an upgrade? Well, oftentimes EDI broke, or you have another process that communicates with another system and it broke. Why did it break? Because 7.4 and 7.5 will not allow you to use what you've already specified this particular application to use, or this service to use. And that causes some pain. And it causes pain with no paper trail, no breadcrumb trail. And we have to kind of open things up a little bit trial and error. It takes longer. It's a pain in the butt. Now, I tell you this because there is a way for you to find out what you're actually using. There's a lick macro, and it will allow you to trace your encryption on your system. So let's just say you're at 7.3 and you're preparing for a 7.4 upgrade. I would go into SST. I would go to my TLS info. And you've kind of it's buried in there, but this little link here is going to show you how to get there. You'll find the lick macro for TLS config. You'll start turning on your connection counters, and then let that sucker run. The longer you let it run, the better. So if you've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks of data, I would rather 2 weeks and 3 weeks rather than 2 hours or 3 hours. There's not enough data. Let it run for a couple of weeks, and then do a TLS config, whatever it is, connection counts display, and it will display on this screen here what you have in terms of protocols, and it'll also show you what ciphers you have that you're using and the counters for that. So then, before you upgrade, you need to understand, are these ciphers supported at 7.4 and 7.5? Yes. Are they turned on by default? No, they are not. You will need post-upgrade to immediately go into SST and re-enable those older ciphers in order to work with the old stuff. Or you can say, well, IBM has turned those ciphers off for a reason. I wonder what that reason is. It's because it's insecure or less than secure. So if IBM says, hey, we're not putting this in the default set of ciphers at 7.4 and 7.5, they're doing it for a reason, for your own benefit. What they're going to do, or what I would recommend you do, would be to say, okay, well, why are we communicating on this weak cipher that's not going to work when we upgrade to 7.4 or 7.5? Well, it's because our trading partner is only using this. Well, I guess I had to put some pressure on that trading partner now, shouldn't I? To say, hey, we're increasing our connection or our encryption capability for cipher negotiation. You guys need to keep up. So upgrade yourself so we can communicate with you at a higher level of encryption, and then we won't have to worry about going into SST after the upgrade and downgrading our encryption. It's the last thing I want to do is downgrade it. However, in a pinch, we will downgrade because it's what you were using all along in order to make it work. I've worked with companies who upgrade and they're working with trading partners that are still using TLS 1.0. Very insecure. They can't get them to move, so they have to continue. They want to maintain the OS at 7.4, but they have to enable not only older ciphers, but older protocols as well. That's not good for anybody, and we don't recommend doing it, but it's the customer, and they're making an informed choice. I may not agree with it, but it's what they want to do, and they will be successful in communicating with their trading partner after the fact. They've been so advised that, hey, this is your problem. But it will work when we're done. If you want to get a little bit more granular from an encryption perspective, let's just see. I mentioned TLS v1. This is a very old screenshot, but it still tells the story very well. This is a TLS 1 connection. If I want to turn on my trace internal, I'm going to capture detailed information about every encrypted connection to and from the system. Okay, that's pretty cool. What does this tell me? Well, it tells me what protocol I'm using, TLS 1.0 right here. It shows me the second one down. That's the cipher I'm using. That's a very old TLS RSA AES cipher. It shows me what port I'm using, 992. Okay, so it's an inbound connection to 992 on my IP address here. My remote IP address is here. What's the server name? It's telling that server. I can kind of tell that by the port number. Either way, I know this is an inbound TLS 1.0 connection. Great. What does that tell me? Well, it probably tells me that it definitely tells me that I am supporting an old protocol and an old cipher on this system. But more importantly, it also shows that the client on the other end, let's just say I'm supporting TLS 1.2 and modern ciphers, it'll also show me that the client that I'm connected to, or that's connecting to me as the server, is probably an old client. It's probably access for Windows, for Mocha, or something else that's not ACS. I don't mean to throw Mocha under the bus. It's a great product, but it could be something that I don't have much visibility into. So when I mentioned updating your ACS, not just having it for admins and developers and IT folks, I say that for a reason. It's for this. It's interoperability, so you can bring the entire business forward in a secure communications fashion. And I literally talked all about this, but you will have the slides for your benefit. And I talked about that. QSEC offer access. Here's a tip. No. Coworker Larry Bolice and I, we did a great session a few years ago. What did we call it, Larry? It was something like "No, Not Yes," and that was the title of the presentation. And we had a good time doing it because we would just throw up ideas and ask question. No, no. So when you have a software vendor, let's just say you buy a product, and I don't care who the vendor is, they're going to come in and they're going to say, yeah, great. I need a copy of QSEC offer because I want to be able to install the product and then support you after the fact by logging in as a QSEC offer copy and let it rip. What are you going to say? You're going to say, hell's no, not a chance. If you have a vendor that claims to require a copy of QSEC offer, they would probably be doing something very invasive on a regular basis. Somebody who's installing a product that works with your spool files and emails them or something like that, I would argue does not need QSEC offer access. And you should always make them justify it as best they can. If they're not willing to justify it, find something else to buy. I mentioned elevating authority and hijacking profiles. It's because of lax security, and it's usually vendor driven. So if any vendor has a problem with that, have a chat with me. I've let a lot of people know at those organizations to say, hey, you might want to be aware the way you're building user profiles is insecure. You might want to stop doing that. Some have, and some have said, no, we need all object special. We need all object special authority. And I would have this conversation over and over. I'm not talking about your special authority. I'm talking about the private authority on your user profile object. They're two very different things. You can keep your all object if you must. However, your user profile needs to be properly secured. So when vendors are looking for QSEC offer, say no by default. I mentioned securing communications. So for FTP or any type of file transfer, try to convert things to use SSH. There's a lot of value in there. SSH, it's actually open SSH when you download and load SSH on your system, or you can pull it down by way of open source utilities, which I'll show you shortly as well. Try to convert your file transfers to something secure. Could you do secure FTP? Effectively FTPS? Yes, you can. Depending on what you're transferring and how big the stuff is and how fast you want the transfer to happen, you may use one or the other, SFTP or FTPS, and they are two very different things. If you're using SSH, that's an automated application. You may want to download a utility called Expect. Expect was built by NIST 40 years ago, give or take. And it's an AIX-based binary that you can just put on your system and use it. Scotty Clement has got a great little explanation about how that works and how you can kind of wrap it. Because as I mentioned earlier, QShell is not a true terminal. It's a terminal emulator. So when you're running SSH file transfers or just logging into a system from QShell, you will have troubles. Expect mitigates that problem and allows you to build logic in your SSH communications, just the same way you use FTP. This is a nice little website, SSL Labs, Qualys. If you have publicly facing IBM Apache servers or any type of web server, I don't care what it is, use this. Test your certificate strength. When talking about encryption, okay, in terms of encrypting your data, most people don't use communications encryption. You should. Most people don't back up their media. If you're looking to encrypt your disk, buying a SAN is your easiest, fastest, and most effective way to encrypt data on your disks. 100%. And Townsend Security, a few years ago, they estimated 75% of customers don't encrypt their data. I would think that's super low. super low. I would say most don't do it. 99%, sure. I'd go with that. Maybe 95% by now. Time check. Okay. Use the new system value called QPassword rules. Why is it new? It's because it was invented in 6.1 and nobody uses it. You should be using it. Convert your existing password rules into QPassword rules. So consolidate them under there. Number one, it's a consolidation. It puts them all under the one roof. The better part of it is that it gives you two parameters in that system value, or two special values. One is called limit profile name. Guess what that does? It allows you to limit your profile name. So if my profile name is spitcher, all right, and I try to change my password to spitcher1, it's not going to let me do it because it will not allow my user ID inside my password. Great. But what if I have all object and secaddr? Well, I can get around your rules. I'll do a change password and put in whatever dummy password. Then I'll do a work user profile spitcher, and I'll change my password there and make it spitcher123 or something like that. That's not good. So the second perm, this all create change, will prevent an administrator or anybody with administrator access. It will disable them from coming in and bypassing the password rules. Okay, it's kind of cool. What if I want to? So somebody would say, well, yeah, that's okay, but they're an administrator, so they could just go in and remove that system value, and then they can change the password to wherever they want. They can put it back, and nobody's the wiser. Sure, yeah, you could, but you can also do another step. All right, always be ahead of them. Go into Service Tools and say, there's a flag there in Service Tools. It's a later slide, but it pertains to this. I'm going to disallow in SST the ability for anybody to change the security related system value. And I've just locked it in Service Tools. So somebody, if they want to bypass this, would have to go into Service Tools, flip that switch. They would have to get out of Service Tools, go to their system values. Now I can remove that. Now I can go and change they got to do a whole lot of work in order to do that. So there's ways that you can lock down your system values in SST, and the instructions are a little ahead, a little bit down the road. So I mentioned this is kind of killing default passwords. It kind of does. Yes, you can go through a big rigmarole and get around it if you're an administrator, but it may be more trouble than it's worth. And if you're doing your system proper, you should be auditing those type of changes and accesses, and then reviewing and then slapping fingers with rulers for people that try to brazenly bypass the rules that are in place in order to facilitate having their damn username inside their password. You got to be kidding me. So you got a human resources problem there. 7.5. Technically, they're not default passwords anymore, because if I do a create user profile at 7.5, under the password screen, it's not star user PRF anymore. So it's not allowing you by default to say, yep, enter, and now I've got a user profile with a default password. It makes you go in there and give them a dummy password or a star none. Or if you're going to go and give them a user password that equals their user ID, it makes you do it manually. So you are at 7.5 at will making a problem on your system by creating an account called bsmith with a password of bsmith. Very dangerous. Locking system values in SST. I mentioned this. Star SST option 7 and allow system value security changes equals 2. So disallow it. So disabled services can't be exploited. If it's off, I can't break into it, right? So it's a good idea to always check your system. Are you using RecSec or remote command? No? Great. Turn it off. That way it's one less attack vector. If I'm doing a pen test, you want to make sure that you are buttoned up as best as possible. Are you using FTP? No, never. Well, we use our FTP client and we send stuff out. Great. What about your FTP server? No, we don't have any inbound connections. Great. Turn it off. Now I can't, attack your FTP server or an SSH server, whatever. If you're not using it, shut it down. Make your system a little bit more secure. Most often than not, when we look at, your TCP server as a navigator, I got 3/4 of it or more turned on, and half it's probably not even used. Cool little command you can download. called Find Big Spool File. Guess what this one does? It's the best named IBM utility ever. It's the most IBM utility. It actually says what it is in the actual title. So I love it. So you can download this and you can find what big spool files you have on your system. There is oh shoot, I think I missed that slide, or I hid the slide. There's an SQL way you can do this as well, which is a little bit, you don't have to go down and download a utility and compile it and then let it rip. You can find that information from Run SQL scripts. Check ACS, Run SQL scripts now. If you go to edit, insert from examples, and you type in spool files, it will give you an example. One of those examples is your top 10 spool consumers or something like that, and you can just riff on that. Reclaiming spool file storage, we see this from time to time. If you want to reclaim spool file storage, use the command to do so. Your system value, yes, you can do that. However, do not set it to 0 days unless IBM support specifically advises you to do that for some ungodly reason. So just be careful with that guy. If you're doing upgrades, this is important. Read the memo to users for each release. Okay. They're not cumulative. So if you're going from 7.3 to 7.5, read the memo for 7.4 and the memo for 7.5. Get very acquainted with those. Obey the rules of the upgrade. All right. Know what's coming down the pike for each release. Now, back in recovery, do you save your spool files? I don't know. Should you? I don't care. You should care. You need a strategy. You want to know how long I'm going to keep these for, which ones I'm going to back up. Just make sure you know what's going on. Because if you're not saving your spool files, let's just say you do a save 21 and you want to migrate to a new machine. There's an option on the save 21 that'll say, save my spool files, star yes or star no. The default is star no. So unless you want to do a recovery twice, you might want to make that star yes. And then you're good to go. Should you save your performance data? No, hell no. Why? Why are you saving your performance data every night? I don't want to save performance data or any data that's meaningless and useless for the purposes of a recovery than performance data. So why back them up to begin with the tape or the virtual tape? Don't do it. Should you save your access paths? Oh yeah, absolutely. So where do you want to spend your time? The little bit of time saving the access paths or the extra ton of time doing a recovery with no access paths? Where are you more under the gun? It's always, if you've ever done recovery, you are under the gun in a recovery. The CFO, the CFO and the CIO are in the doorway saying, hey, Bill, when's this going to be done? They've got the pressure on, they're putting pressure on you. And you realize, maybe I should have been saving those access paths. We would be waiting here an extra hour and a half. It's important to do. Whoop. Should you end subsystems before save 21? I would argue yes. 7.4, this is a nice little tip. New option to handle controlling subsystems after a save 21. I'll give a shout out to the old boss, Pete Masiello, or former boss. This is his idea. This is a CAC requirement that we talked about, and we voted on it, and we got it in there. After we do a save 21, Service Express does a save 21. Do you think we're just going to let the system come up and be happy and everything's back normal? No, if we're doing a save 21, or if you're doing a save 21 with us, we're about to do something invasive. So the last thing I want to do is start all the jobs. I'm about to, I'm putting you to sleep with the IPL, and now I'm getting my scalpel open, my chest spreaders, and I'm going to do something invasive. I'm doing open heart surgery. There's no way I'm going to let you wake up before, why would I do that? It's a waste of time. So it's a nice thing. Should you end subsystems before power down sys? I would argue, yes. I always do. And not just out of force of habit either. If I do with the system up, a power down sys, and I do an immediate end to my subsystems, or even a controlled end. If there are some jobs or some tasks that are hung, if the limit gets exceeded, your power down limit is exceeded, that's a system value, the system is going to end itself with an end job abnormal command. What does that do? Well, it's going to end the system for sure. It's going to end those jobs, but your next IPL is going to be marked abnormal. If an abnormal IPL is triggered, if you're trying to apply PTFs or do an OS upgrade or something like that, it won't. It's an abnormal IPL. It's going to come up with some enhanced checking, and it's not going to do any of the fun stuff that you want to do to begin with. So should you end it before? I would argue yes. If you run BRMS, non-incremental, remove the object details when your tape is reused, please. Otherwise, you're keeping years of detailed information of stuff that you can't even pull from a tape because you've overwritten it. Run your BRMS maintenance, run your reorgs in BRMS. These are very important things. In terms of backup and recovery, don't ignore your errors. I see this all the time. Okay, backup ran normally. We had 642 errors. Everything's good. Whoa, why? No, you should have 0 errors. So if you have things that are locked, shut them down before the backup or omit the object on the backup job. If you omit it, write it down somewhere why you omit that object. That way, your errors will always be 0. Not always. If you have a problem, you will have an error. And there's a big difference between understanding something that's greater than 0, where 0 is the standard. If I have 2, if I have 1, if I have 2,400, I know something went sideways. However, if my normal is 647, and then the next week I have a save and my, errors was 742 or 691, doesn't matter. You think I'm going to think that's a problem? No, it's a couple of things were locked, whatever. No, I want to know what I'm not getting or why I didn't get the night before so I can get it the day after. Invest in proper, accessible tape storage. Your buddy who owns a bank can access the bank vault. Sorry, not good enough. He's not going to come running at 3 o'clock in the morning. We need tape. And underneath the bed in a box is not good either. I don't care what you use. Make sure it's accessible and it's appropriate. Get a little Fire King safe for $3,500. Stick something in there, whatever. I don't care as long as it's something appropriate, offsite, and you can get to it when you need to. Get some adequate fire suppression. I've got stories that I may not want to take the time to go into right now, other than let's just say they involve an 8x8x8 room with water sprinklers in them and a watertight door seal. So, fire in the server room, how much time would it take? They had tarps over the servers. How much time would it take for water to actually increase and make it to the servers on the racks? I don't know. More fire suppression. That's proper. Yeah. And an umbrella. If this was a live session, I could see all your faces and you're all giggling right now. This is important. Make sure IBM, if you have software maintenance or hardware maintenance, make sure your change contact info is appropriate information, not your developer who died 4 years ago or retired 10 years ago. Make sure this is up to date. Make sure your HMC information is up to date on where the alerts are going to go to. Your amber attention light. I call this the ambiance light because it's always on, right? You walk into the server room, you get this nice orange glow everywhere. It's almost like candlelight. Makes you want to open a bottle of wine. No, it's like the backup issue. The default is 0. Well, this light default is off. So if somebody comes in and swaps a disk drive or replaces a backplane or whatever that triggered the attention light to come on to begin with, make sure when they're done, they shut that sucker down. We want to make that the exception, not the rule. Asynchronous bring. If you're backing up your IFS objects, your stream files, give this a shot. You might see 10, 20% speed improvement on backing that stuff up. Ethernet cables, you're putting a new machine in a data center or even in locally if you have just a little server room. Plug in your cables. Maybe you want to do link ag, down the road. Maybe you want to do something kind of cool like that, but you have a remote data center and you're only allowed in there, once every blue moon. Well, if you plug all your Ethernet cables in, they're already plugged into a switch. Now, if you want to do link ag 6, months later, you can do that. The hardware is already in place. Why not? Plug them in. Disable IPv6 if you don't need it on. It's just a waste of resources. Exploiting idle cores. I like this a lot. If you have, I mentioned that you can't buy a power systems machine with any less than 4 cores. And for years now, that's the lowest you can get. So if I have 1 core, 1 license of IBM I, and a little 4-core PO5 machine, Power 10, Power 9, whatever. Okay, that's great. I'm using 1 core, and that's all I'm authorized to use from IBM's perspective for IBM I. Great. The other 3 cores I can use for Linux, maybe. And Linux runs on Power incredibly well. incredibly well. So maybe you want to take advantage of some of the existing hardware you've already used. You can have IBM I hosting Linux. You don't need an HMC to do this. It's better, but you can certainly create your virtual disks and use VPM or something and build your Power Linux partitions and just have that running underneath IBM I. IBM I is just hosting the disk. The power system, the processor, the memory, that's all the power system's perspective. So yeah, why not? It's very easy to install Linux on this. Little time saver. Don't create save files in advance. Every piece of IBM literature for the last 35 years says when you're transferring something to your, IBM I partition, create the save file. And then you can go and say, forget all that, all right? If you have a save file on your desktop, open a command prompt, put, FTP to my server, put save file name to, I want to put it in a library somewhere. I want to put it in QGPL. Okay, great. Put the save file into /QGPL, QGPL.lib, save file name.save file. Let it rip. It's going to put it there. I don't need to create the save file in advance. It's a waste of time. Checking your HTTP server threads, the default is 40. Okay. Sometimes people have that scaled way, 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 way down. So if you're having Apache performance problems, you might want to check that out. Mentioned riffing on some older commands, your work link. If I want to do this, with a detail /name, I get the full name. I don't get the little concatenated version on the left-hand side. I'll get the full name on the right. If you're having issues with IFS locking, you can do this with SQL. You can also do this with this utility called work lock. Global environment variables for Java. Okay. Yeah, this is... there's some new Java that's available. I'm not going to go into the new Java, but if you're looking to go, let's just say you're still on an older release and you're using Java 7, you can force everything to Java 8 or higher by creating an environment variable called Java Home. Row and column access control. You probably have this and you don't even know it now. What is it? Well, it's called Advanced Data Security for I, option 47 of the operating system. All right. If you have done an OS upgrade to 7.3 when this thing was put out, it's been enhanced since then. It's likely you don't have 47 installed. Install it. What does it do? It's allow you to set row and column access control. So I could say in this table, there is a social insurance number field, or something very, maybe a bad example, but something that's very private. And I want to secure that particular column to only the CFO and the controller. That's it. Nobody else can even know it's there. They're not pulling that data back. They're not scrambling it on the screen. It's null. It's nothing. They're not accessing it, period. So this is the value of that little utility. It's free. It's part of the operating system. When we do OS upgrades, we always add this because it gives you some value. Open source package management. All right. IBM started with the OPS product, the 5733 OPS. That's been deprecated. In fact, it was deprecated probably less than 2 years after they released it because they found a better way to do it. They put it in your ACS client. Okay. And tools, open source package management. Now it's actually, this is an older screenshot. Now it's down here somewhere underneath management, I do believe. And you can install open source utilities. It will connect by way of SSH to your system, and then you can pull down, I don't know, Perl. If you want to use Perl, pull down R or Python. I'm not an open source developer, but there's some neat stuff in here to use for sure. Standardize and modernize DB2. Stop using DDS to define tables. Use SQL. Use your schemas. I'll go back to this window here. Go into schemas here, and you can build your tables in a GUI fashion a little easier. You can also build them with SQL. It makes things a little bit better. In a rack, heavy stuff goes on the bottom, right? I had this conversation with a customer of mine who was making a joke. Yeah, well, I have plenty of U's in my rack. I'm just, I'm not tall enough to reach the top shelf. I'm like, don't you dare. He's like, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. So save your back and save your, time and money. Don't put things at the top that's too heavy. EIM, this is one of my favorite features of IBM because number one, it's free. You can facilitate two things. Number one, you can eliminate passwords on your IBM I, take advantage of Active Directory, use that as your password manager, and then map your AD users to your IBM I partitions. That's excellent. It does a couple of things that facilitates single sign-on, and more bigger for any of the CIOs and IT management on this call, it eliminates password resets for IBMI. What a waste of time. Put that stuff on your Windows team, right? Your AD people. If they have a bad password on the network, great. We're using Kerberos to access IBMI. We're not even using passwords. And that, with 5 minutes to spare, is all she wrote. So I'm going to check here and see if there's any questions.
Steve, as always, you do have a bunch of questions there.
It's lucky I left myself 5 minutes.
And if we don't get through all of these, we will take them and bring them back to the live Q&A tomorrow. So we will make sure we'll get these answered.
Oh, I wish I had context. Is that 7.4? Authority collection on the IFS root. Is that only at 7.5? No, that authority collection for objects came out at 7.4. So at 7.4, 7.5, and so on, we'll have authority collection for objects. So if you have a root directory share, as somebody had alluded to, then yes, most definitely. How do we look for option 47? Check and see if row and column access is installed. Do a Go license program or Go lick pig'em. Take option 10 and page down once, I would say, and you should be able to find it or not find it. But it's there under 5770 SS1, option 47. BRMS backups using flash copy does not update the last change or use dates. I'm not a flash copy guru. I'm not a BRMS guru. Stephen McIver would probably know the answer to that question. So Don, just write down that name and give us a call, and I'm sure Stephen would be able to tell you that. I don't know. Let's see. Might you have a sample SQL that compares multiple LPAR system values that you can share? I just might. And not handy, but I can probably find something like that. Let's see. Might you have an opinion on the settings for audit level that you're willing to share? Depends on what you're trying to achieve. All right. I would argue the default set and nothing less. If you're not using your system audit journal or your security audit journal, I would argue you should be. And I'll get into that in my session on IBMI hardening, ransomware remediation, things. I can't remember what the heck the session's called, but my next longer session. Do you know of a product that supports MFA with SSO? That's an interesting topic, because people, it's kind of depends on what you want to achieve, right? So MFA on IBMI with SSO, all handled on the IBMI, kind of makes no sense to me. I would argue that having the MFA on the domain and the MFA on the domain and single sign-on. Okay, that's great. You're getting your Kerberos authentication, you're getting your single sign-on, but you're also putting a second factor in there, and the second factor is on the domain. I don't have a problem with that. Let's see. It's hard to read these questions because it keeps moving on me. A couple of people lost the audio. I'm not sure how widespread that was. How can I tell if users have ACS encrypted? Is there an SQL I can run to see if who is encrypted and who is not? I don't really understand the grammar of the question there. If you want to see, I think what you're trying to ask is, users with ACS, which ones have the encryption turned on or not? Okay, it's easy to check manually. You go into the system, configuration settings, and that one checkbox that says use, encrypted connection. Sure, you can eyeball that. If you want to also look at information, from the system, what I would do, and I wouldn't let this run for weeks, but I would turn on socket connections. So there are 3 or 4 socket connections. There's one for NetTel server, and there's one for NetSoc, and there's secure one. So you can tell by the port number. Now, this is going to be chatty for sure, but you can turn that on, and then you can trap your inbound connections using your audit journal. You can find that information out easily with SQL. So I could say I've got 42 people coming in over port 992, and I also have 17 people coming in on port 23. Well, okay, that's great. It also gives me the IP address and the user ID, and I can build my little map to go, who am I going to call to yell at to make that change? So yes, you can definitely do that. And Heather comes on camera, so I'm assuming that we are done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. Great session as always. So everyone right now, we are going to go to a quick break. While on break, why don't you go back to the lobby, check around, see, go to the chat section, see who's online. Also, just remember, Hannah is in the book a meeting section, and that is a way to get points. I won't tell you how many, but I know there's a lot of points assigned for that. So you'll definitely want to pay her a visit right quick before the break. When you are back and ready to go to the next session, just make sure you click in the sessions tab. And then from there, we will bring you to Nathan Williams, what you need to deploy Access Client Solutions, or Larry doing planning and executing a smooth IBM I cloud migration. So thank you everyone for joining this session. If we did not get to your questions, we will get to them tomorrow at the live Q&A. And we've got a lot more, Steve, coming up through the event. So thanks everyone. We'll see you back after the break.